All right, guys, Wes here. Welcome back to the channel. And we just got some Last of Us Part 3 news that you guys do not want to miss out on. As you know, The Last of Us is one of Sony's biggest properties. And while some of us may be a little tired of hearing about it, unless that is you're like me and you're ready for any type of news about The Last of Us, whether it's the show or it's the highly rated games and the upcoming multiplayer factions game, needless to say, the community is massive and it's only grown thanks to the excellent HBO adaptation. There's a lot of hype for The Last of Us series right now. And with Naughty Dog reportedly working on a brand new IP in addition to the long-awaited Last of Us multiplayer game, so it may seem like the third main installment has taken a backseat to everything else in the works, but as it turns out, that may not actually be the case. So today we're going to go over everything that we know about the third Last of Us game, as well as all of the details that have recently leaked, and when we could expect to see some official news about the next entry in this iconic and beloved franchise. Real quick, guys, I'm giving away a PS5 to one lucky subscriber for 130,000 subscribers, and yes, it will be the Spider-Man PS5, so if you'd like to win that, check the pinned comment and best of luck. Check the video chapters to optimize your viewing experience, and let's get started. So just recently we got our first official glimpse at the future of The Last of Us in the world of gaming, which was in the form of a major leak that seems to have come from a casting call that was officially sent out by Naughty Dog. According to the information that was made public by known leaker Daniel RPK, the game will center around a group of characters in a Victorian house on the outskirts of an apocalyptic city, and will feature some characters that go by Lucas, Mason, Val, Ezra, and Gracie. Now, according to the leaked info, Mason is a former soldier whose loyalty is challenged throughout the story. Lucas is a strong male leader who develops a relationship with another young scavenger and will seemingly have a bit of a dark twist to his character. Val is the female leader of the group. Ezra is a male character who reportedly wants to take control of the house and be the new leader. And then we have Gracie, who is a female character aged 18 to 25, but there aren't any other details on her. So apparently The Last of Us Part 3 will be focusing on a new central group of characters, which I think is a breath of fresh air that this series needs right now. Now, it's not 100% confirmed whether this is for Last of Us Part 3 or if it's for factions. I would hope that it's for Part 3, seeing as factions is supposed to come out sometime soon, or at the very least sooner than Last of Us Part 3. Now, there's been some new leaks that have also claimed that motion capture and audio recording for this new Last of Us game will start later in 2023. And while Ellie was not a part of the initial leak, she will apparently be present in the game, at least to the degree she was in Part 2. Obviously, Ellie wouldn't be in the casting call information since her motion capture actress is already well established, but I do think it's interesting that we have all of this information about new characters that have nothing to do with Ellie, and yet Ellie will still be a central character in the new game. I don't know, that sounds a little far-fetched to me, and possibly the game might be trying to go in too many different directions, but then again, I could just be getting a little cynical after the story of Part 2 kind of let me down. Everyone at Naughty Dog are great storytellers, and I absolutely welcome a shift of perspective to new characters. I'm just not sure I believe the part of the leaks that says Ellie is returning in Part 3, because remember, all of the details we got from the new characters came from an all but confirmed casting call, but the Ellie leaks came from an entirely different source, and apparently those leaks initially came from someone who usually focuses on movie leaks and not the games. So we know for a fact that Naughty Dog is working on a brand new cast of characters for this new Last of Us game, but it's unclear if any of the Part 2 characters will be returning. I know a lot of people are really attached to these existing characters, but with Ellie's plot arc pretty much wrapped up at the end of Part 2, it seems like a good time to pivot to a new perspective of this universe and follow a new cast of characters with some new themes and storytelling opportunities. The HBO adaptation did a great job showing us what this universe is like when we're not focusing on the main cast of characters, and there are so many awesome angles that Naughty Dog could take with this new perspective. Like, remember that episode of the show with Nick Offerman that basically had nothing to do with the main plot, but it was all still a really compelling short story about people surviving in this world? Naughty Dog could make a ton of Last of Us games and never run out of characters for us to follow and stories to get invested in. Honestly, I think it's time to leave Ellie behind. Unless Naughty Dog has a really good way to continue her story in Part 3, she should either be relegated to a background character or left behind entirely. Her story has been told and it's time to move on, in my opinion. Despite The Last of Us multiplayer game reportedly starting development as a part of Last of Us Part 2, it still hasn't seen the light of day, and we still haven't gotten any gameplay or even an official logo yet. Earlier this year, Naughty Dog announced that the project had been struggling in development, and insiders had reported that Sony even brought in Bungie to help assess what was wrong with it, as well as what needed to be changed in terms of the live service elements in order to make a game worth showing off. Naughty Dog seems to be seriously struggling with their first multiplayer focused game, and from the sounds of it, Last of Us Part 3 may actually be getting more attention from the studio at this point. The Last of Us multiplayer game has had a passionate team working on it since the late 2010s, while Part 3 is believed to have only started production relatively recently. Many of us were under the impression that Naughty Dog was hard at work on both the multiplayer Last of Us game and their new IP, but recent reports are starting to make it sound like the studio once again is relegating the multiplayer game game to a background project, while part 3 takes the main focus, at least when it comes to the Last of Us IP. So if you were hoping the Naughty Dog was going to put their A-team on finishing up the multiplayer and making it the best game they possibly could, that's not actually sounding like it's reality. Instead, Naughty Dog is chugging along with part 3 and basically leaving the B team to finish up the multiplayer game with the guidance of Bungie, as the higher ups basically just cross their fingers and hope it all works out. Granted, that could just be some cynical observation on my part, but the impression that I'm getting is that Naughty Dog is putting more attention towards part 3 and their new IP than they are to the struggling multiplayer project. And while I'm hoping everything gets figured out eventually, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if the project just gets flat out canceled at this point, so that more attention can be put towards the larger projects. Now, in addition to the Last of Us news, there was a pretty major shakeup at Naughty Dog recently when on July 11th it was announced that co-president Evan Wells was retiring after a quarter century at the company. They announced their departure with the statement that says this, and I quote, "This is something that I've been discussing with Naughty Dog studio leadership team for well over a year, and with Neil for even longer than that. The decision brings with it overwhelming and conflicted emotions, but I've come to realize that I'm content with my time at the studio and all that we've accomplished together over the last 25 years. I couldn't be more confident in Neil's ability to carry on running the studio. It's the right time for me to provide the opportunity for him and others on the studio leadership team to steer the studio into a successful future." So as of right now, it appears that Neil Druckmann is by himself at the top of the Naughty Dog food chain, and fans definitely have mixed feelings about that. On one hand, Druckmann is a fantastic writer and obviously very talented. When it comes to creative minds at major game studios, love him or hate him, there's no denying that Neil Druckmann is one of the most artistically driven studio heads in the industry right now. But on the other hand, Neil Druckmann does have a bit of a reputation for letting his creative vision get the best of him, resulting in sometimes hostile work conditions and incredibly controversial story decision like the one seen in The Last of Us Part 2. While Neil Druckmann is obviously a very talented guy, he clearly needs some work in the management side of things. So with his co-president stepping down, I guess we'll get to see how well Druckmann does with more control of the company. While the release date for the multiplayer game seems very up in the air, we actually have a bit of early reports that part 3 of The Last of Us game is going to launch in 2026, if not even earlier. Insiders have claimed that Naughty Dog is shooting to get this game out near the end of the PS5's life cycle, similarly to how the first game launched at the end of the PS3 life cycle and part 2 launched the near of the end of the PS4's. There's reportedly been some discussion within Naughty Dog over the possibility of making part 3 a cross-gen title with the PlayStation 6, but right now it seems like the development is moving forward with just the PlayStation 5, and there's a decent chance the game comes out in 2026. However, some other insiders have claimed that the game is not going to come out until late 2027 or even move into 2028, which would reportedly put it solidly in the realm of being cross-gen, since the PlayStation 6 is seemingly going to drop sometime in 2028, although this is obviously subject to change. Personally, I think 2026 predictions are a tad optimistic given how long it takes to make games these days, especially as detailed as what Naughty Dog pumps out. So personally, I'm expecting this game to come out in 2027 or 28 as a PlayStation 5 exclusive, and then a cross-gen patch for PS5 comes out, but it will not launch as a cross-gen title. I just don't see that happening. Now, as for when we can actually see the game, I think the reports of a 2026 release date are accurate, which means we probably won't get a reveal until next year at the very earliest. Some have suggested that we're actually going to see The Last of Us at the rumored August PlayStation showcase, but I think that's way too optimistic. If this game is going to come out in 2026, Sony likely won't reveal it until 2 years prior to launch at the absolute earliest. Maybe they'll tease it in this year's show with a logo at the very most, but there is no way that we're going to see a trailer for this game until 2024, and that is if the game is coming out in 2026, and even then I wouldn't be surprised if Sony holds on to it until 2025, which makes the marketing campaign short and sweet. If we see anything from The Last of Us at the August showcase that is allegedly happening, it's going to be in the form of the multiplayer game, but even then it seems like that's a long shot at this point, given the fact that Naughty Dog themselves admitted earlier this year that there was still a lot of work to be done on this project. So if I had to guess, I would say that we're going to see The Last of Us multiplayer project in early 2024, and then get a reveal for The Last of Us Part 3 in either late 2024 or early 25, and then The Last of Us multiplayer will launch in early 25, and then The Last of Us Part 3 will come out in mid to late 2026. I also think it's possible that the multiplayer game ends up pushing back Part 3, but at the end of the day, I doubt there will be much rollover between the multiplayer and Part 3 teams within Naughty Dog, as evidenced by the fact that the multiplayer game has been in development for quite some time now, while the production on Part 3 has only recently begun. So ultimately, I'm expecting Part 3 to come out in 2026 and the multiplayer game to debut a year prior, but I'm sure some of you will bookmark this video and come back in a couple of years to tell me I was wrong. But let me know what you think about The Last of Us Part 3 down in the comments below. Also, tell me if you still have faith in the multiplayer project or not. Personally, I love Naughty Dog. I would love to see them succeed and branch out into new fields, but I would be lying to you if I I told you that I wasn't a little bit concerned about the state of Last of Us multiplayer project, because it always pains me to see a single player developer try to take on a live service game. It happened with Arcane and it didn't work out with him. So hopefully Naughty Dog decides to reel in the Last of Us project and focus all of their development on part 3. But yeah, guys, that's gonna wrap it up with this video. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. Do me a favor, leave a like, subscribe to the channel with your notifications turned on, and if you want to win that Spider-Man PS5, check the pin comment for those details. And until next time, this has been Wes, and I'll talk to you guys again soon.